You know, as much as I love vinyl and music collecting and everything, in all formats, vinyl, tape, cassette, MP3, CD, I have it all. But mostly at heart, I'm a radio guy. I've been listening to Top 40 radio since I was a wee little tot. My mom had it on all the time. And over the years, there have been a lot of great shows on the radio that brought me some of the best music of my life. And I'm going to tell you about it this week. I'm TC Kirkham of the Kirkham Report. Welcome to Rank This!
1.
Hello guys and gals, VC and everyone else out there. I'm TC Kirkham, the Kirkham Report, and welcome to Rank This, where I rank different things about music and just stuff in general. This week I'm going to talk about music radio. There have been a lot of great shows on the radio over the years, and I have been a diehard radio fan since I was a little kid, so we're talking the mid-60s here. I mean, over the last 20 years, it's turned into crap with constant repeaters where they play the same 8 songs over and over and over again. But, at one point in time, spanning a pretty good area, there were a lot of great music radio shows. And this week, I'm going to bring you my top 20, the top 20 syndicated music radio shows. Starting at number 20. It's a show I only listened to a few times, but I do like it, and it was good, really good, when its original host was there. Now they have different hosts, but it's still pretty good. Number 20 is Open House Party, originally hosted by John Garabedian. This show, airing on Saturday and Sunday nights. At one point it was live, now it's tracked. Aired great dance music and all kinds of, it was all types of music, all types of, geared toward the dance floor or geared toward the party floor. So not all of it was danceable. Sometimes you got some metal or heavy metal or, alternative that fit the bill. But for over 20 years, John Garabedian kept this show going. He left it a few years ago and had turned it over to 2 new hosts who host Saturday and Sunday night. But it is still a great show, and it is on, in most markets still, including Boston, every Saturday night. It's for people who want to have fun. Open House Party with John Garabedian, originally number 20 on my top syndicated radio music shows. At number 19 is a countdown show that most people probably don't remember. It wasn't nearly as popular as, say, American Top 40 or Casey's Top 40 or even Rick D's Top 40. But it was still a pretty good show when it was on in the 80s and early 90s. Number 19, Countdown America with John Leader. I have quite a few of these on vinyl. I've purchased a number of them. I always liked John Leader as a host. I have a couple of other things he's involved with too. But Countdown America counted down the top 40 songs in America. I believe they used the Cashbox chart originally, and then they went over to Media Base, similar to some of the other shows over the years. Top 40, similar features to Casey Kasem, but it wasn't the original. It's still a lot of fun, and if you've never heard it, maybe I should make one of these available at some point just so people can get a listen to it. Number 19, Countdown America with John Leader on the syndicated music radio shows. Number 18 is a show most people may not remember. It originally aired in the fall of 1978, and it's been revised 2 or 3 times, including an upcoming revision that's scheduled for airing in 2023. But the original show, 1978's version, is still the most and best remembered by most radio fans and for the fans of all music genres. Westwood One's The History of Rock and Roll. This show put together a whole bunch of great stuff and basically gave the history of rock and roll from 1955 to 1978, including medleys of #1 hits that are still revered, and talked about the artists, the hits they had. It used a variety of hosts, and it was really well done. I've heard another recent revision, I believe it was in 1997 or so, and I'm looking forward to hearing the upcoming version. Hopefully somebody around here will carry it. But it's going to be interesting to see how much music has changed over the years, just in time for yet another musical revolution, as we're no doubt going to have another one sometime soon. We usually do every 2 or 3 years. Number 18, 1978's edition of Westwood One's The History of Rock and Roll. Number 17, show I actually got on once, and it was a lot of fun to do it. Every week, host Bob Coburn would take your questions for some of the top music stars around the world. Rockline with Bob Coburn. The show premiered initially. There wasn't a video version of it also on MTV with Martha Quinn, but it was the radio version that I remember, and I used to tune into every week on the station that carried it in Columbus, Ohio. I don't remember which one it was. But back in 1989 or 90, around the time Characters by Stevie Wonder was released, Stevie did the show, and I got on the phone and called him up and got to ask him when Stay Gold was coming out, because there was never an official soundtrack for The Outsiders, at least not at that time. It eventually, he said, it would eventually be released down the road, probably on a greatest hits package, and it was. Stevie released a 2-CD song history set with all of his great songs on it in 1996, I believe it was, and Stay Gold was included. It was nice to see Stevie keep his promise. It's always been one of my favorite songs, because The Outsiders is one of my favorite books of all time. The movie is better when they re-edited it to put the front and the back of it on again instead of just the middle part, but it was still a lot of fun. Over the years, Coburn hosted rock acts from Poison to Motley Crue. He had pop acts on, New Kids on the Block. He had folky acts like Suzanne Vega. He had everybody, and it was always fun to listen to somebody like you get on to talk with the weekly celebrities. Number 17, Rockline with Bob Coburn. Number 16 is going to surprise people. But if you were up really early Sunday morning in most markets from the mid 1980s through the early 2000s, no doubt you got a chance to hear Powerline. Powerline was a half-hour syndicated show, commercial-free, that used current pop music to tell the story of the gospel. It was produced by a religious company, hosted by Brother Tom, I want to say. It's been a while. It's not on anymore, at least not that I could find anything on. And he would weave in stories from the Bible around current pop hits that fit the format. Now, they weren't going to play anything outrageous. It was always stuff that leaned more AC than true rock and roll, but it was still fun to listen to, and it was interesting to see how they would come up with these platitudes from the Gospels. There was a country counterpart called Country Crossroads, and there was another show called Master Control, which used contemporary Christian music. All three of them we aired on discjockey.com from 1998 to 2000. I still enjoyed all of those shows, and I used to work the 11 to 7 shift, so it would be on right before I got off work on Sunday morning. Number 16 on my syndicated music radio shows favorites, Powerline. At number 15 is a show many of you are going to say, wow, TC, I would have never expected that from you. What better concert show was there than the King Biscuit Flower Hour? The show ran for over 20 years. I think it finally ended in 1996, if I remember reading right. But that show had everybody on, from Led Zeppelin to Yes to Steely Dan to Steelers Wheel back in the day. When Jerry Rafferty was part of that band, they had, even in the midst of the 70s, they tried to stay close to their rock roots, but they did end up with some middle-of-the-road type stuff at the time, even though they were putting on their best rock face for the concerts, acts like the Eagles and the Doobie Brothers, who were more pop than rock at that point. I always enjoyed hearing those because they're, you don't get live stuff that much on radio, And they were fun to listen to, and they always will be. You can get most of them through a number of radio outlets that sell copies of it with licensed from the King Biscuit Flower Hour itself. Look around if you're looking for a particular show. Number 15, the King Biscuit Flower Hour. Number 14 is a personal stake for me. Not because I was in it, but because I knew the host. And I also enjoyed listening to the show years before I met him. Number 14, Reelin' in the Years with George Taylor Morris. Reelin' in the Years spotlighted AOR tracks mostly from the 60s and 70s originally, then the 70s and 80s as it went along. And George, in his soft, dulcet tones, would have stories about the acts he had on, interviews with them, and a lot more. George ended up being my boss for the final year I was at DiscJockey.com. He came on board as our main program director. You couldn't have asked for a nicer gentleman. He was a very good mentor to me, along with my friend, the late Rich Chadwick, and helped me along quite a bit. I was so saddened to find of his passing a few years later. I didn't know he'd passed on, and I wish I had, because I definitely would have sent the family my condolences. George was a truly kind and generous man who knew music history backward and forward, and he showed it off on this show and in his work with me at DiscJockey.com. George, I will miss you forever, and I miss your show a lot too. Number 14, Reelin' in the Years with George Taylor Morris. At number 13, another nostalgia show, Dick Clark's Rock, Roll, and Remember. On this show, which aired for 2 or 3 years in the mid-80s, Dick Clark, or a guest host occasionally, would sit down and spend 3 hours talking about music from the 50s and early 60s mostly. A lot of classic acts were on, like Frankie Avalon and Fabian and Connie Francis and a number of other ones, as he talked about them. Now, I wasn't really into the music of the 50s and 60s, but I was a big fan of Dick Clark, and I enjoyed the show. It was well put together, and it exposed me to a bunch of older music I had not heard of. My friend Katie would have absolutely adored the show. They played all kinds of those doo-wop groups that she so much adores. And Dick just brought it together in his usual inimitable style as the world's oldest teenager. He'd been young back then. He still seemed young to me in the 80s, and he still had fun doing it every week. Number 13, Dick Clark's Rock, Roll, and Remember. Number 12 is a show that's going to surprise you. But in all honesty, again, I had some connection with the host at DiscJockey.com. Didn't get to know him as well as I got to know George Taylor Morris. We mostly spoke on the telephone because he lived in Hawaii. But I enjoyed the show, and I enjoyed the music that it came with. Musical star streams, or as host Forrest used to put it, musical star streams. 2 hours of new age and ambient music every week, with often without any bumpers except at the half-hour mark. I've talked about my love for new age on this week's Influencers, where I talked about Andreas Vollenweider. Musical Starstreams was right up my alley. Now, strangely enough, I never got into Hearts of Space because we didn't really listen to public radio that much. Musical Starstreams was the first show I've ever seen that played a lot of that kind of music, and I loved it. I had to listen to it because we encoded it in real time when we got it. So I got to listen to it every week, and it was a lot of fun, and it exposed me to a ton of new age artists I didn't know, and I enjoyed interacting with Forrest. He was a lot of fun too. If you've never heard it, it still airs, and you can still find it on local radio stations and on the internet under now the title Starstreams. Number 12 on my list, Musical Starstreams with Forrest. At number 11, I used to listen to this every week religiously. It was on Sunday afternoons at 3 on Rock 98 QFM, which wasn't really rock, and it was an automated station for the most part. It was the FM equivalent of it was 2 hits and 2 oldies and commercial breaks, and it was all automated. KHQ-FM in Spokane. But every Sunday afternoon at 3, I was there for the Robert W. Morgan Special of the Week. Robert W. Morgan was legendary from his stints as an LA DJ I believe it was with KHJ. I may be wrong. Um, but he every week had a great show where he interviewed one artist and played their music over the years. I remember hearing a lot of different shows, especially, and I listened to it again when WCLT FM ran it on Saturday afternoons, right before Rock, Roll, and Remember, actually, in the early 80s. And, they had acts like Daryl Hall and John Oates and Sheena Easton, and going back a little further, they had Barry Gibb and the Bee Gees, all with Robert W. Morgan's deep, dulcet tones, there's that word again, and his air of authority for making you feel like you were getting to know this act. It was a lot of fun, and I miss those terribly, and I miss Robert too. He was one of the best voices in radio ever. Number 11, Robert W. Morgan's Special of the Week. My top 10 starts off with another Dick Clark entry, Dick Clark's National Music Survey. I tried to sing the jingle, but I'm not going to. Aired on the Mutual Broadcasting Network when it still aired. Dick Clark counted up the top 30 songs of the week based on the radio and records chart at the time. It was only later that AT40 picked that up. And later on, Dick would give way to Lisa Gibbons, who would host it for the next several years in the early 90s. And it was a great show, lots of fun. It was aimed more for AC stations than true top 40, because a lot of the stuff they did was softer, but it was based on, I guess they pulled the chart out of the main radio and records charts. It was still fun, had lots of great features, and again, it was Dick freaking Clark. I am a Dick freaking Clark mark. I'm sorry. Love the guy, everything he ever did. Number 10, Dick Clark's National Music Survey. Now, the next two are probably shows you aren't going to know, because they each only lasted 2 years, each in the mid-70s, and it's a shame. I've looked everywhere trying to find transcripts for them, and I can't. In 1974, Westwood One created an adult contemporary, or easy listening, version of American Top 40, and they turned to legendary disc jockey and game show host and Top 40 hit maker Wink Martindale to host it. It was called Music Scene USA, and it counted down the top 40 easy listening hits of the week, as it was called then. They didn't change the name to Adult Contemporary until 1979. It was on this countdown that I would listen to every week from 12 noon to 3 p.m. in the afternoon on KVI Seattle every Sunday afternoon. And it is where I first heard Ding a Dong by T-Chen shortly after it won the Eurovision Song Contest in 1975. And a lot more, because I actually started listening earlier in the year, around the time Neil Sedaka hit number 1 with The Immigrant. I think that was in February. It was a great show. It only lasted 2 years, and I would love to find some vinyl radio transcripts of that show. Number 9, Music Scene USA, hosted by Wink Martindale. And number 8 was its AOR equivalent. From 1979 to 1981, I can't remember the name of the station. I'd have to look it up on my website, and I will, and probably step it in here. But it was on Walla Walla's radio station when I lived in Washington, right before the Dr. Domino show, in fact. And it was a countdown of the top 20 album-oriented rock songs of the week. Now, this is right when I had first started getting into AOR, thanks to a family friend, when my tastes were broadening past disco to new age and AOR. And the Great American Radio Show with Mike Harrison was a big part of that. It's where I first heard Down to the Waterline by Dire Straits, and it was where I first heard a lot of album tracks I was unfamiliar with, including a song that ended up becoming one of my favorite songs of all time, Run Home Girl by Sad Cafe. Mike had this very laid-back, almost bedtime style to his interviewing and his hosting, and it didn't last very long. It only lasted for 2 years. But I thought it was a great show, and I was there every Sunday afternoon at 5 to listen when I could, because the station was quite a ways away. We sometimes had quite a bit of interference on the FM band, but I still, because I lived about 2.5 hours north of Walla Walla at the time, so I didn't always have perfect reception, but usually it came in well enough for me to listen. Number 8, The Great American Radio Show with Mike Harrison. At number 7, I mean, how can you not have Rick Dees on this list? The Rick Dees Weekly Top 40. Rick has been an institution since the late 80s when he began hosting a competitor to AT40. And his style of humor, his brand of hijinks, I never really got into some of it all the way, but I've enjoyed Rick as a host and as a DJ on many things. I really loved his short-lived late-night series Into the Night in the 1989, 1990, somewhere in there. It was on ABC before Jimmy Kimmel came along. I loved him as host of Solid Gold for one season, and I like Disco Duck, so sue me. Rick Dees is a great performer all the way around, as is his wife Julie, and they make this show magic. Sometimes they get a little bit too weird for me, and I haven't heard it for a while because I don't think our local station carries it anymore. If they do, I don't know what time it's on. I should probably try and check it out. But in any case, it's always a fun thing, and Rick Dees is the reason why. The Rick Dees Weekly Top 40, number 7 on my list of top syndicated music radio shows. At number 6, okay, you can scream at me if you want to, but I loved it, and it was the closest thing to top 40 you could actually get at the time it was on the air. Number 6, the Radio Disney Top 30 Countdown. They had a variety of different hosts over the years from 1998 to 2006 when I was listening, but it played every Saturday afternoon. I think it was on at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and I usually had it on either at home or on my Walkman if we were out. I always enjoyed it. I enjoyed the caller interaction with the kids calling in. The songs were never, not really big top 40 hits, but they were big on the Disney Channel request list, and that included a lot of good songs, I'm sorry, including acts that I loved that nobody else was playing, like Hanson. In any case, I enjoyed listening to the show. Radio Disney actually pulled the plug in 2021, and everyone is more sad for it, because it was truly the last vestige of old-style top 40 radio there was for much of its run. I listened to it nearly every night coming home from work from 1996 to 2000, because it was just way more entertaining than local stations. I always enjoyed Radio Disney, and I loved their countdown. Number 6, the Radio Disney Top 30 Countdown. Number 5, another show I have a personal connection to, because it's my kind of show. And you can hear it. It is a syndicated show again, and it is fantastic. The Lost 45s with Barry Scott. Proud to call Barry a friend. He worked for DiscJockey.com for a number of months while I was there, and he did the Lost 45s on DiscJockey.com as an exclusive live show on Friday afternoons for several months while he was there, because local Boston radio had changed and he had been dropped from the station he was on at the time and was trying to renegotiate with another station. Barry is just one of the coolest people I've ever met, and his knowledge of 70s and 80s top 40 is immeasurable. I mean, mine is pretty good. This guy does me a little bit better, and I'll give him that. It's why he's been a success with this show for almost, if not more than, 30 years. First on Boston radio and then nationally syndicated. He is terrific. If you get him in your area and you haven't heard him, you should check him out, or go to his website and hook up there. The Lost 45s. The Lost 45s with Barry Scott, number 5. At number 4, another short-lived series. I don't think it lasted more than a couple years, but I used to listen to it at 11 o'clock in the evening every week when WNCI Columbus, Ohio would play it. I would usually just be coming to work and would have it on the first hour I was there. Future Hits with Joel Denver. He was playing the newest releases. He also ran down the top 5 on the British top 40 every week, which led to me hearing stuff from ancient years, because at the time I was listening, 1991, Patrick McNee and Honor Blackman were back in the top 10 with a song called Kinky Boots, which would later be used as the inspirational title for the Broadway show and the movie. Joel had a great, it was only an hour long. He played all the up-and-coming hits. Not all of them ever made it to big hits, but a lot of them did. I hosted a similar series called Flash Tracks for DiscJockey.com for a while, highlighting the new stuff we got in each week, and I enjoyed doing that too. And another show I'd love to find transcripts of on CD or vinyl, either one, because it'd be a great record for some hits that never were, I suppose, as well. Number 4, another, I believe it was another Westwood One production, Future Hits with Joel Denver. Top 3, we're up to the big 3. There are 3 people that fit 3 shows, and 2 of them were on the same show at one point, but not at the same time. But they were still influential in my musical career and my musical life as a fan. Number 3, it's time to get wacky, the Dr. Demento Show. I have been a fan of Dr. Demento since I was in junior high, and I first read an article about him in, I believe it was in either Dynamite or Bananas magazine. The magazine is distributed by Scholastic through your local school book club. I didn't actually hear him until 1978, when I found him on the Walla Walla station, and I never missed him again. And then we moved to Ohio. I found a station that played him. I haven't listened for a while. Of course, he's only on the internet now, but he is still churning out new shows, and he has great stuff, great themes. Dr. Demento is instrumental because he made loopy, goofy, crazy, even strange music normal. And that's what made it work. He introduced the world to Weird Al Yankovic. He introduced the world to Barnes and Barnes, of Fishhead's fame. He helped introduce the world to classic comedy bits by the Frantics and by several other comedy troupes over the years. He highlighted goofy songs by regular artists like Blood Rock's DOA and Timothy by The Boys. He helped spawn a generation of novelty lovers, including myself and my wife, another huge fan of the show. So sorry. But the Doctor is always going to be in, as far as I'm concerned. Barry Hansen has been doing this for 50 years now, and he is an expert at what he does. I remember, getting my first exposure to Frank Gallup's The Ballad of Irving on this show, my first exposure to the masterwork of Shel Silverstein on this show, to the obnoxious Tom T-Bone Stankus and his obnoxiously annoying existential blues on this show. It was a lot of fun, and I spent a lot of Sunday evenings with the great Doctor from 1978 forward. Number 3, the Dr. Demento Show. At number 2, in 1988, Casey Kasem left American Top 40 in a salary dispute. In January 1989, Westwood One, instead of Watermark, stepped in and gave him his own show called Casey's Top 40. It's number 2. Number 2 on my list is Casey's Top 40. I'm Casey Kasem. I wish I had that talent. Casey Kasem was the greatest DJ of all time, in my opinion. He still is. I'm sorry, Ryan Seacrest, you cannot hold a candle to the master. Casey's Top 40 brought over many of the bits he had done before on AT40, and also added new stuff. It was often on the same station as his old show, Casey's Top 40, ran on WNCI from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. every Sunday morning, and I was usually there listening. Again, I think they used the radio and records chart. I know they didn't use the Billboard chart, but it was always fun to listen to him because he was just that damn good at what he did. It wasn't quite the same show, but it was still pretty good, and I've got quite a few copies of it in my collection. Number 2, Casey's Top 40 from Westwood One. And at number 1, with a bullet, and always at number 1 on my list, the one, the only, the original American Top 40, with Casey Kasem from 1970 to 1988, and with Shadow Stevens from 1988 to 1996. I enjoyed both hosts. There are some people who can't stand Shadow and would only listen to Casey. I thought Shadow did an admirable job stepping in to the shoes of one of the toughest jobs I would ever want, following Casey Kasem. I was a fan of Shadows at the time from his work on the Hollywood Squares revival that was popular then, and I thought he was dynamite in that show, but there was nothing like the original. I was there from about the time I was 7. I was there when it expanded from 3 hours to 4 hours every week in 1978. I was there every week I could be, many times writing down the top 40 songs every week, and all enjoying the sound of Casey Kasem and his authoritative voice counting up Billboard's top 40 hits off the Hot 100 every week. It made me the chart fanatic I am today. It made me the Casey Kasem fan I have been all my life. I have enjoyed Casey's work, not just in radio, but in voiceovers as well. As Shaggy on Scooby-Doo for many years, and Robin on Super Friends, and Mark on Battle of the Planets, and all these other places he did it. But Casey's home to me was American Top 40, and that's where he belonged. He was there, and he came back to it in 1998 when AM/FM radio purchased the rights and the name to the show, and he jumped ship from Westwood One and returned to where he should have been all along, American Top 40. Not to say the Shadow Stevens years were bad. He did a great job too, and if you've never listened to Shadow's versions, you should. He's quite good. Shadow had a lot more guest hosts though than Casey did, but it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed hearing it. By the time Shadow's run was over, only the Armed Forces Network was carrying it, but it was a show that transcends time. It was only off the air really for 2 years before AM, FM, or AM, PM brought it back. And of course, it's still running as AT40 with Ryan Seacrest. In any case, American Top 40. Number 1 on my hit parade of the syndicated music radio shows. Just for the record, it isn't just music radio I listen to. If I were to include all my favorite radio shows, it would also include the CBS Mystery Theater, which aired through most of the 70s and into the early 80s every evening at 9 on CBS Radio, locally carried in Spokane by KXLY at the time. And for 2 years, it was followed by the Sears Hour of Adventure. I would listen to those quite often and enjoyed them quite much. I could understand why radio was the dominant medium it was before television came along. And of course, radio would not be the same without the authoritative voice of Paul Harvey. Paul Harvey News and Comment was an everyday staple for me until he passed away in 2000 something. I've forgotten the year. And I also enjoyed Paul Harvey's The Rest of the Story as well, most of which were written by his son, Paul Harvey Jr. And both of those helped shape me into the person I am as well. Opinion and commentary that helped me think about the day's news. We don't get that much anymore. You get a lot of talking heads and a lot of overly partisan coverage of news. There isn't someone out there that just gives you the news flat and says, make up your own mind, which is pretty much what Paul Harvey did for me. In any case, I hope you've enjoyed this list, and I will have another list next week connected to music or somewhere on Rank This, and I thank you for watching. If you don't subscribe already, please do. I would really appreciate it. Just got done with a great contest that got me from under 200 to almost 500 subscribers. Now I'm trying to get across that 500 limit so I can use my community tab. So if you know somebody that hasn't subscribed and should, please send them over. I'd love to see them here. And don't forget to leave a comment. I'd love to know what radio shows you listen to, and especially if you have any radio transcripts you'd like to get rid of. I'm always in the market and we can make a deal on them, especially for the ones I've mentioned here and the ones I don't have that I really like. For Rank This, I'm TC Kirkham, the Kirkham Report. I'll see you soon. Ciao, baby. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.